of this year, 2019, we went to Eugene, Oregon. You guys came with mental health centers for Denver. There was a couple people from 911, the DPD, the police department that is, Denver Justice Project, obviously, Servicios de la Raza is a community kind of provider, and a representative of a group called Dasher, Denver Alliance for Street Health Response. And am I missing anyone? Was there anyone else that came?
I don't think that was it.
And
Leslie,
the
that's
Caring for
right.
Denver folks, right? Leslie and Lorez, board chair and ED of Caring for Denver Foundation. So we went and basically spent a weekend getting kind of presentations from the Cahoots staff. Cahoots is a program of a larger sort of community-based, low-income, no-income nonprofit clinic called Whitebird. And so the Whitebird staff run Cahoots, and their staff were presenting to us all weekend in these kind of sessions about their model, its history, its kind of like how it works, who their partners are, and all along the way they were peeling a few of us out for 6-hour shifts to go like actually ride along in the van, answering calls live and being there on the scene with the Cahoots workers, so that we could really get a deep sense of how Cahoots works and see some of what their processes are, so that in the hopes that we could take what we learned and bring it back here.
That's some fast action.
Yeah.
Actually.
And Roshan did the night shift, so.
I did.
More power to you.
Yeah.
No, I mean to have gone there then and have it being implemented now. That seems...
Well, I mean, it's not being implemented right now. We are in the process of trying to figure out how do we launch a pilot where we can kind of like do some troubleshooting and build some networks, and then take what we learn and then roll out a real program, hopefully, sometime in 2020. But yes, I mean, it's the police chief's behind it. There's obviously a lot of community demand, and there's a huge need.
Candy Cedar Buckers behind it.
Yeah, there's been many more city council people kind of coming to support it because they see how great a way to address a series of problems is. But there's a lot of I think, network weaving to be done. I kind of imagine the Cahoots program as this spider kind of weaving a web between many different points that those connections between many of these systems don't exist, but Cahoots has been in place in Eugene for 30 years, and so in lots of ways their existence has connected and kind of forced the question for lots of different sort of system actors to figure out how they collaborate better, and I hope that that's also going to be one of the effects here.
So being that Denver's obviously on a grander scale than Eugene, how does it look like with the larger population with, and the different, can you kind of give me an idea of the different organizations that are going to be involved, how to, social workers, what community organizations, all that kind of stuff?
I think that probably, one of the things that Chris and I kind of initially realized was that we would need a much larger scale Cahoots model to serve Denver. I think they have 2 vans in Eugene.
They have 2 on. There's many
Two
more.
on.
There's a fleet, but there's 2
right,
on
but
at a
2
time.
working at one time, and that we would likely need more manpower to cover the city because, of course, if you have to wait a long time for your crisis response, that's not ideal. We also have a very, diverse population in Denver and want to make sure that we're serving each of those individual communities, in a culturally competent and culturally responsive way. I think those were kind of the 2 things that leapt out to me initially, seeing the Eugene model.
I mean, I think that the needs are. We don't know. We don't know how we're gonna weave all these things together. What partners are gonna be there? That's why it's not we're still trying to figure out the pilot, because there's many different agencies that could be involved, and there's also this kind of there's no resources there yet.
For instance, when there was a instance at my husband's work, and I called mobile crisis. Mobile crisis didn't come, but sent police. So would it be in that same aspect where there's that one number, and then it just goes a team comes to somebody who's in crisis, or appears to be.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I think part of it is also the Eugene model. Everything is run through dispatch, so 911, non-emergency, but they all kind of funnel into the same thing. Mobile crisis is a part of Colorado crisis line.
Okay.
So they're the ones that trigger mobile crisis to go out. So this would be, if we're following it to the Eugene model, would be 911 based, but it's recognizing that there are calls that sometimes we just don't need a police response that currently elicit a police response. Like, when we did the ride-alongs, there were welfare checks attached with it. That was elderly person that no one had had contact with. Like, that's something that you would just send someone just to knock on a door and see if you can engage someone. A down party, whether that's someone sleeping, whether that's someone's passed out. Being able to get someone on there that doesn't have a police presence, but just someone that can go and have a real conversation with someone in that moment and determine, what am I seeing? What's going on? And even the ability on occasion for individuals that are feeling suicidal, feeling depressed, feeling like I am just reaching out for help. What does that help look like? It's being able to send the right people with the right network that Eugene has done over 30 years of like collaboration with the community and saying, what is it you need now? What is it that we can help get you to? And then being able to say, I have options A, B, C, depending on like this area of town has this area of town has this is a more accessible one. I think it's Eugene is great because they've had 30 years of experience doing this, and we're gonna find our way through the fog a little bit, and then kind of come out on the other end with hopefully a wider community partnership of what something like this looks like.
Right now, we have a co-responder program that pairs a licensed mental health clinician with a Denver police officer. But I think the biggest difference between a co-responder program and the Cahoots model is that there isn't that automatic police response when a call comes in. When I was on my ride-along in Eugene, there was an instance where the Cahoots staff did need to call police, and that was appropriate and what was needed at that time. But somebody tried to de-escalate without law enforcement, present there first, and kind of that presence of just a clinician, someone who's there that can do crisis de-escalation without automatically involving police, I think is probably the biggest difference in what Denver's really looking for. I think the police recognize, that their tools don't always fit the scenario, that they signed up to protect the community, to fight crime and arrest bad guys, and that a lot of the calls that they wind up on, there is no law enforcement solution. It's a mental health solution. It's a community resource solution. And I think that's really what Denver's looking for with the Cahoots program, is to really just have individuals who can respond with whatever it is that person needs in that moment, and meet people where they're at, and maybe spend a little more time working on whatever it is that they need that day.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important difference too, is that it's the same people who are out here providing care, not enforcing laws. And so after a while, when there's people like your sons who are just kind of like gonna be around and you're gonna see them, those people working for Cahoots, they know him, they know his name, they know a little bit about his background, about some of his diagnoses, and we would see on the ride-alongs, the ride-along that I did in Eugene, there was a couple times where we didn't have any calls to actually go respond to, so we were just driving around in the van, and the Cahoots workers would actually just like see someone and say like, oh look, there's John, let's stop and see how he's doing, because we know we took him to the ER or to some sobering place, a couple days ago, and they've got like socks and water bottles and stuff that they can just like hand folks to just like help do that really prevention care, and I think that that's also a major difference between the co-responders not going anywhere unless they're asked to, and if I don't know, but like if you guys see someone on the street, I don't know if the cop car is going to pull over, and it's also going to be a different response if a cop car pulls up.
Yes, I think that.
Versus and that's the huge part, is just that these are people who are clearly not here to take you somewhere you don't want to go, and in fact they can't. That's a really fundamental difference, is that Cahoots workers, it's all consent based. There is no coercion that they're allowed to do. If they feel like somebody must be taken to a hospital, they call the police and the police do that. Because they really are here to offer people help if they want it. And if they don't, they can't do anything to make them receive help.
So I'm not too comfortable with that part where you're saying that the police, like if someone needed to be taken to the hospital, that the police do that. I would have to disagree with you there, because then you're not putting, I think we would have to take out that police presence when they're in a crisis, because when my son on July 7th was, I called mobile crisis on him. He was dehydrated, decompensating, and I called, and they came out. It took an hour for a person to come out, but there are 6 police officers that came. So the ambulance refused to take him, and the social worker, she made an executive decision to say, no, you're going to take Matthew because we have a contract with you, and he doesn't need to be taken by police. So I would like to see if someone does need to be taken to the hospital, that police still don't need to be involved unless there's, unless it calls for, like, there's weapons or something like that, or they're, displaying some sort of violence. But as far as like somebody who is decompensating, I think that it has to be police removed from that situation, because in the sense where they were going to take Matt in a cop car, he's not in trouble. He's just, so I would still like to see police out of that. And I guess that leads to the question of who would take that person? Is that an ambulance? Is that the social worker? Is that MHCD?
So I tend to agree with you, Janet. I think when we are saying, okay, well, now something involuntary needs to happen, let's bring the hammer, let's bring police, we're opening that up to just be another negative experience with law enforcement and another, interaction that could potentially, go badly. Chris and I initiate tons of mental health holds all the time, and are really successful in talking to people and getting them to go to the hospital without incident. Just supporting them and letting them know that what we're doing is to keep them safe and to help them.
But if they refuse to go, that's when you would get the police involved.
Well, and I think that's the part of the Eugene model that I think we all really, really liked, is that it's the humane model attached with it. It's not a time restraint. Someone that doesn't want to go to the hospital, like if you can spend enough time with that person and just kind of say, like, here is why, and here's some justification for it, and like really like try to like, and it's a special person that can build rapport in such a quick amount of time that someone trusts them. And even if that means, and Carleigh and I have been on that, where it's someone that's going to the hospital, it's saying, I'm going to be right behind you in the car, or I'm going to be, if in perfect situations, sometimes we can get on an ambulance and just say, I'm going to be with you. Like, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to meet you in the ER. I'm going to walk back with you. I'm going to explain. I'm going to introduce you to all the psych staff. And really kind of being able to say, I'm not leaving you to be alone in this very vulnerable moment for you, but instead, I'm going to make sure that I'm your advocate in this moment, and I'm going to make sure that I'm following up with you after the fact, which is another cahoots thing that we're hoping that, it's not just it's not a Band-Aid, it's a follow-up, and it's that piece and building relationships over time. And so, and then I'm hoping, I think we alluded to it earlier, is that these programs that kind of come up in Denver, that they're not siloed. Like, I would hope that this would be a collaboration with existing co-responder teams, which would be a perfect world, like a hospital-based team. Any of those teams that kind of just like, all of a sudden it's everyone's handing off to the next person in line to say, this is what we talked with them about future outcomes. And here's the next person that's going to help get that future outcome. And if it's not them, great, the next person, they're the person that gets to do it. And it's just, and it's just continuing at that.
Yeah, and I agree, Janet, like, no one wants the coercive thing to happen. And like, for the Eugene model, they've drawn a really clear line that like, we don't force people into our van. Because if they can, and if they do, then what's the difference between them and a cop?
Right.
And so like, they will do, it's not that, they see that someone really ought to be on a mental health hold because they're a danger to themselves or others, and just phone the police and get them in here. They will do the work that Chris is talking about to like build a relationship and try to convince them, will you come with us, please? And try to get them, then they will take them to wherever the next step is in the Cahoots van. But if they've been at a scene for a couple hours and someone's still refusing to go, and they there's legal reasons that they can't let this person continue to be out on the street unattended because they're a danger to others, then that's when it's the last resort that you call police and say we tried the let's come with us kind of, now we're taking you with us. And but if the Cahoots team or whatever that looks like here in Denver ultimately has that power and is executing that kind of strategy, there's no difference between them and a cop, and why are we even doing this?
And I think, to add another layer to it, I think it's important to have community awareness so that, because the people who end up calling the cops on people like my son are just people in the community, whether it's a business or somebody walking by, driving by, and I feel like it's important that we have that awareness of the Cahoots Model Program, whatever that name's going to be.
So to that point, Denver City Council is in the process of formatting legislation or a video for all city employees to take before they go on their shift or whatever, when they're newly hired, so they know exactly how to deal with our mentally ill, how to deal with our unhoused neighbors, how to deal with people that are a victim of their circumstance, and not have to resort to calling the police.
Right.
That should absolutely be the last resort, is calling the police.
Right. I feel that some of the stigma around mental illness has been probably the biggest negative. When I see, stuff coming up on Facebook or comments, it's that fear. They're not educated about mental illness.
Well, and I think there's this idea that people, we hear it every day on the news and on social media, people with mental illness are dangerous, they're violent, and the truth is that that's completely untrue. Individuals with a mental health diagnosis are much more likely to be victims of crimes than they are perpetrators. But yet we have this narrative that's perpetuated that we're in danger, that we may need the police because, they're going to hurt us. And the truth of the matter is that I've, been in contact with and evaluated and supported hundreds of people in mental health crisis throughout my career, and nobody has ever hurt me or tried to hurt me. That's just a false narrative.
I can't point to a person with a face and a name in the city who I would say they're a naysayer. We've had a ton of support for this program coming because everyone knows they're kind of we're at our wits' end of how do we actually do this without really shifting the dynamic in our city. But I think that, if there were naysayers, it would be people who kind of have this law and order belief that the criminal justice system is somehow gonna solve all these problems. I mean, that's why we're in the situation in lots of ways from my perspective now, because every problem, the police are holding that hammer and nail problem, the police are holding a hammer and every problem looks like a nail, but society, has been holding the police as the hammer and every problem's a nail. And we really have been sold this narrative and this myth for, since the 80s and the tough on crime era, that somehow a police officer arresting someone and taking them to jail is actually the solution for everything. And it's because we have this kind of, the naysayer is the culture of disposability, that we've got problems, and so we need to just take these things that we don't need, these people we don't need, and just throw them away. And wherever away is, is better than here.
There's, the other thing I think is people think, well, if you did a crime, even if it was camping or trespassing, that you have to be held accountable. And if you ask somebody, if you question that, you say, accountable how or why or who does that serve? Because if you're homeless and you trespass, then isn't the solution to get you housing so you don't have to anymore?
Right.
How is the solution to put you in jail for that, which doesn't help anybody? It doesn't solve anything.
Because you have ridiculous laws like the urban camping ban.
Well, because people don't have access to the things they need, like
Right.
housing.
Well, and it ties back to this American narrative of just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Which
If
logically
you
makes
tried
no
harder,
sense.
you wouldn't be in this situation. I think everybody sitting at this table knows that we're sitting here, largely due to luck and privilege and, certain uncontrollable factors aligning for us, and so many of the people that we work with or the people that we know and love haven't been that lucky.
I think we're in like a prime opportunity for Denver to kind of take a culture shift as well. Eugene, it's just so weird to be part of a community that just anytime Cahoots was brought up, they knew what it was. And that anytime you were on a call, it was not, I'm calling on this person, at least when I was doing the ride, it wasn't just calling on this person. It was like, I'm concerned for a citizen on the street. I hung out until Cahoots got there. And I think Denver right now is in this weird vex of we don't want to deal with mental health. I see it on the street, I'll call someone for it, but I don't want to go and talk to that person. I don't want to develop a relationship. The homeless individual in my alley, I'm not going to go talk to. I expect someone else to deal with that for me. And I think as a community, it's an opportunity for us to say we are our brother's helper, keeper, supporter, and being able to actually say, the conversation should never be, well, I've been told not to talk to that person. You should talk to that person. You should get to know that person. You could be that support for that person. You can be the first responder for that person when a crisis happens that doesn't even have to have Cahoots, doesn't have to have police. When they feel comfortability with you, you're the person that goes to. And I think right now Denver's in a culture shift or and just being able to not be afraid of the unknown or the weird or the strange and just accept the person for who they are, and just how do we help each other? How do we build on each other? And I think that makes a strong community, which is what I kind of saw in Eugene as this, everyone seemed to have a good understanding of what their ultimate goal was. It was like a social model of helping.
I feel there are naysayers though, and I feel that it's developers, businesses that line across the Denver city streets. For example, downtown, Matt was walking back and forth in front of a business, and thank God that there was a police officer that actually reached out to me and called me, which I call community policing. But the business complained, and because it said that it was driving some of their customers away, which he wasn't harming anybody. He was just talking to himself, walking back and forth. Of course, I went and picked him up. But again, I feel there are naysayers because it's affecting, in their mind, their bottom dollar. So again, it comes down to that money. So that's, and I get what you're saying, and it's that mentality, that mindset of these people are an eyesore to our community. And I don't want that. My son, I pay taxes. My son is a part of this community, and I want him to be able to walk freely in his neighborhood. If he wants to go back and forth 20 times on a street talking to himself, so be it. So I make it a point, and this is the only thing that I can do from my perspective until this model comes out, is educate the businesses around within my neighborhood to say, this is my son. If you're gonna call the cops, here's my number, call me first, I'll come pick him up. And they have done that. There's a pizza parlor next door. He likes to go over there sometimes, and he just picks up all the trash and just walks around the parking lot, and then they'll come and they'll give him a slice of pizza or soda, or the little corner store that's next door. They'll call me and say, Janet, or they'll call my other son and say, your brother's over here or your son's over here. And that is what needs to happen, because a lot of these businesses, that's what they get trespassing for. There's a 7-Eleven on Federal where I got into an argument with the lady there because she threatened to call the cop. Well, she did call the cops on my son, but I got there to intervene before. So again, these are the things that are happening, and so these are the naysayers. These are the people that are creating this police inner contact.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of highlighting a bigger issue that, we have this larger discussion of who belongs in Denver.
Right.
Do transplants belong? Do homeless individuals belong? Do people who use substances belong? And I think the answer is that everybody belongs.
Well, that's what the mayor said, we're all Denver.
Yeah, but you hear these conversations of who belongs here and who doesn't, and who we want to see and who we don't want to see, and I think a program like Cahoots really serves all the members of their community.
Right.
And then to that point, this past election, all we heard was we can do better. And it's like, okay, so if we can do better, then let's do better.
I agree.
And this is one of the ways we can do better. So to that point about the bids, my godmother sits on the board for the 5 Points Business Improvement District. And the last meeting we had at the beginning of this month, I let them know about Cahoots and that they need to stop calling the police on unhoused neighbors and people that are mentally ill in front of their business, and find other alternative ways. So they have private security now that basically goes up and down 5 Points and does welfare checks on some of the unhoused neighbors in the area. So it's a step.
It's a start.
Yeah.
Yeah.